Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about a few ways you can diversify your forms training. Not all of these drills are only for sword. Many of them you can translate in some capacity to open hand, to bow staff, to like many other types of weapons. So let's go straight into it, right? So the vanilla version, which I'm not going to go into in any detail, is just go through the form normally, right? That's the exciting thing to do, right? Is to go through the form in which it was originally intended, the way that it was originally taught, and again, going through the form with the intentionality of, maybe I want to focus on stances in this one, or maybe I want to focus on application on this one. Maybe I want to focus on timing or playing with timing. So there's a lot of different ways you can still play with an original form as you normally go through it, but I want to give you a couple other things you can kind of do to, again, have a little more fun with what you got. As an example, we're going to take Sangsu Gumbap Samban, so the third Gumdo form, and just use that in a multitude of different ways. We're only going to use like the beginning portion of it because there's going to be a lot of different ways to do that form. Let's get started with that, right? So first up is just going through it normally, right? So my emphasis on this one is going to be trying to have a nice precision with my strikes and pulling back with enough power as opposed to just being like smack, smack. So playing with timing a little bit, right? So if we're here, again, Chunbi position. Yeah! Nothing too crazy, right? So that form is pretty upright for most of it, and so it's not a super interesting one just yet. Let's take a look at the first alteration that we can do. This video is not sponsored, by the way, but I highly recommend if you do any one-handed stuff, which we're going to, hint, what we're going to do next. I highly recommend Purple Armory's synthetics, right? So they're relatively inexpensive. They actually have pretty decent weight to them. So especially for something like a Dao, most Dao that you find are like competition Daos, and they're very lightweight to the point that you no longer really working a weapon, you're kind of just working on like mechanics. So I highly recommend this one in particular. This is a Dao. It's meant for one-handed. It's gonna be a lot of fun. A little more heavy on the actual edge, which is really good. So let's take a look. Yeah. Couple notes on that, right? So notice that center cuts are a little bit weird one-handed, but also like middle guards, you can also open up a little bit depending on like where your hip position is. You can also have a little more back if you do want that a little more straight up. So there's a lot of different ways that you can just play with a guard, right? So it really depends on like which direction you want to go, which is why it's fun to kind of play with these things. So I recommend two variants on the same. Having the same hip position, but a little more open in terms of your like tip should still be honed in towards the throat, but open with a guard here. Or if you do want that more straight, open more of a sideways guard this way, and a little bit more like almost like fencing position, just for the again a little bit of a different flair. Again, not sponsored, but Purple Heart has a lot of interesting other weapons as well. So this is a Kopesh, for example, also a really fun one-hand weapon that you can use. It's a lot smaller than I think a lot of people think when they think of a Kopesh, but I think this is actually how it was historically, and you can kind of get a good vibe for like how it moves. So highly recommend just try it also with other one-handed weapons, including this, right? So this is a Jian. I highly recommend also if you do kind of expand your one-handeds. The Dao is the one I would probably prioritize the most. Maybe then followed by a Jian or another straight sword like this. Again, because it's a very different sensation to be slashing with a curved weapon versus trying to cut with a straight edged weapon. So highly recommend if you do branch out, Dao probably is number one, again for one-handed, and then going into Jian, and then just whatever looks cool and fun. Spoilers, the forms are going to look less and less good if they even started off as okay before, because we're getting into the harder but also a little more interesting, right? So we did two-handed, we did one-handed, let's do one-handed, left-handed. So from here, So the reason I particularly like this one is it's going to start to get you back into a trainer mode, right? So like when you first learn sword, that probably wasn't very natural, and this is a nice way to kind of forcibly reset your brain, almost like, again, you're back in that like white belt mentality of like, how do I do this with a sword? Additionally, what I really like about this is you start to no longer think about right leg and more about like the lead hand, right? So instead of saying right leg forward, right hand, you can say, oh, lead leg with whatever the sword is in, right? So lead leg versus lagging leg, and going like, oh, I want to go to my lead leg side as opposed to like the right side or left side. I find that really, really helpful and lots of fun. Yeah. Next, so this is not quite exactly what I'm thinking, but eventually if you have a buckler on you, using one-handed with a buckler. I'm using this kind of as a substitute for it because I don't have a buckler yet. One day I will, but the idea is to be able to shove, or again, throw that buckler out whenever you're exposing yourself by cutting towards your lead side. So for example, and this is what I'm kind of taking from Kali a little bit, so I'm taking some liberties with that. So if I'm cutting close in, my guard's already open. But if I'm opening towards my lead side, if I don't do anything, again, I'm a little more open, so I tend to kind of like shove what would be the buckler forward as I do an open strike. Yeah. Now, you can probably guess what we're going to do next, right? So let's do it mirror image, right? So this is also the same one, right? So that's why I like talking about going towards the lead side, right? So as I'm cutting across here, opening up, that's when you're going to throw your buckler out, right? Or tonfa, or whatever you want to be using here, right? So same idea. Let's take a look. Yeah. Now, something that could be a next step, but I'm going to not do it in this video, is theoretically, we've done one-handed. We've done one-handed with a shield. You could do double weapon. However, that's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more things you have to incorporate into it. You have to have a lot more background knowledge in order to make double weapons work. So, for example, if we're here, it would be, I won't call it silly because I'm sure there are people out there who can make it work. But for example, the first move in 3 is going to be striking towards your off side usually, right? So if I'm right hand dominant, we're going towards our left side. So you could, double tap, and then double tap, and then going into however you would want to open for what would be a normal guard this way. In actual sparring and stuff like that, although double tapping is good for, again, deflecting something, just doing everything as a double is not going to be as effective as you might want it to be. So, as much and as cool as it is to be able to do some double strikes this way, I would actually recommend going on to our last one that I recommend doing, which we're going to have some fun with. For those of you looking for a truly humbling experience, try, in fact, doing a double-handed form, fully mirror image. That means, so normally we have our lead hand on top, usually our right hand on top, fully reversing it and fully mirroring the form. So this, again, truly is a humbling experience, especially as someone, the more specialized you get into swordsmanship, the more you veer from it is the weirder it gets, right? So try going through a form, fully mirror image. Yeah. Now, if you want the full fun, also try to put the sword away. Even if you like switch to reverse grip, which is my go-to, it's still very, whoop, there we go. It's not going to be nearly as clean as you are used to doing. But that is the last step we can do, at least for now. Now, with all of that said, you do not need to get specialized equipment for each individual step. I did because I think swords are cool, so I have a few swords. But you could literally do all of this with this sword. You can do all of this with a wooden sword. You can do all of this with a stick that you're particularly fond of. It doesn't have to be any specialized equipment. You can literally pick up, like, just hold your fist out for that, allegedly for the buckler, right? Hold the fist out almost like you're going to do a punch or something. You can theoretically do this all open hand, which also leads us into ways you can improve your open hand as well. So at least in Taekwondo, which is the open hand I'm most familiar with, the beginning forms tend to already have the mirror image built into it. But as you get into higher and higher levels, the forms aren't as mirror image. So by practicing the mirror image, in fact, going through the form backwards is a whole other thing that I like to have my students do. Lots of fun, and also it gets you to really think and, again, get yourself back into the learning mindset. So again, forcing yourself back, again, like a couple years to be able to, again, explain and, again, feel how it is when you're, like, new. So lots of fun. That's all I have for you today. So these are things that I've been working on for the past couple months, again, to make myself not as stir crazy sometimes. So highly recommend that you, again, take it, augment it, do whatever you want with these drills, because they're ultimately there just to make you have a wider appreciation for swordsmanship. But with that, make sure you stay safe, stay humble, and keep training.